Hello, I'm David Hunt. Today's guest, it's me. Sue, my co-host on Friday Drive on Joy 94.9, is going to interview me today. So let's change seats, Sue.
I think we better. That's actually quite a good spot here, David. You've enjoyed it for quite a long time.
I have. I've been doing it now for a few years, and which is lovely because people from our community stories of coming out and what they've achieved in their life.
Today we are turning the tables, and I am Sue Wilkinson and David is my radio husband.
This will be very interesting because you, as I said just a moment ago, you're my co-host on Friday Drive on Joy, and we've been doing it for 10 years.
10 years, I can't believe it.
So you must know a fair bit about me.
I know an awful lot about you, but David, you've been creating this show. You were the creative mind behind it, and you've certainly driven it all this time. And we've learnt a lot about a lot of people, but
including you.
Including me. Thank you very much. But I think it's time to actually find out a bit more about what drives the man behind all of this.
Okay.
So we're going to take you back, right back in time.
Way back.
Get that ball out. But I also want to say that you're an amazing a volunteer and a person who's absolutely tireless and relentless in our community in making sure that the right things happen for people, which is amazing. So I do want to make that statement before I probably say something probably rude along the way. But you have been my co-host and producer on Friday Drive on Joy 94.9.
Yep.
You also created, you host and you produce Sunday Arts Magazine.
I do.
Which we'll be talking about as well. You've done this Bent TV production.
Yep.
But where did it all start?
Oh, look, Adelaide.
Yeah.
I'm an Adelaide boy. I'm one of four. I've got three siblings, and I'm the youngest by 10 years.
By 10 years. Now, some would call that a little bit of a
mistake.
A mistake.
Yep, I was. I even have a sister old enough to be my mother. Right. She would have been mid to late teens, but she could have still definitely been my mum. What happened was that they had the three kids. They thought that was it. My dad got sick. And quite sick, and this night they must.
He wasn't that unwell.
No, yeah. And my mum went to the doctors because the family doctor, and she said to him, "I'm not well. Is it just the stress of like my husband not being well and all that?" And the family doctor looked at my mother and said, "I don't have to do the test, but I will. You're pregnant." And there was tears and because then my father got sicker, and by the time I was 6 months old, he died. So my mum was left with four kids, but the eldest one was going out to work, had to. It was leaving school early, had to help supporting the family. But it was a lovely era as well. My father was part of a tennis club because the pubs used to close at 6 o'clock and didn't open on Sundays as well. So it was an excuse to have somewhere to go drinking.
Like father, like son there, I can see a thread.
And so therefore the club, this tennis club, when my father died and my mum with a baby in arms, the cutest baby in arms,
I'm sure,
they bought the house that my mother was living in.
Incredible.
Yep, which was a huge load off of her. Yeah. But as time went on and I got a bit older and my siblings were helping the girls, not my brother, but my two sisters, helped raise me because my mother was out at work a lot of the time. At some stages she had 3 to 4 jobs.
It was certainly a different time then, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then of course because I was so much younger, my siblings got married and I was almost like an only child growing up.
So what did you do to amuse yourself in Adelaide as a young lad?
Well, look, I had the most amazing friends. I was very lucky. Met friends at school and through, I was mad football, as in Australian rules football. It wasn't called AFL back then. And I helped form the Port Adelaide cheer squad, which, how
you made the pom-poms.
How gay is that? Yeah, absolutely. And had so much riotous fun. And some of the friends who I still have to this day were, edging towards that. Because being gay was a very, you kept it a secret back then.
Absolutely. So what years were we talking about here when you were perhaps in high school?
Yeah, in the 60s.
In the 60s.
In the 60s. And there was a revolution happening as well, and it was music. And music changed my life. Music absolutely changed my life. At the awakening, because it was, the 50s was the doldrum, plus I was a young kid in the 50s, but in the 40s was the war.
Yeah.
So therefore,
times.
The 60s was changing rapidly, and you could be your own person. And I was lucky enough to be around these amazing people. I saw the Beatles live.
That's incredible.
They came to Adelaide, and I saw them live. I didn't hear them. I saw them live.
What do you mean you didn't hear them?
I was second row from the front, and the screaming was so loud that and the amplification back then was virtually nil. Like these tiny little speaker boxes, and the screaming was just the most exciting. I'll never forget it. It was extraordinary, and footage you see now of a Beatles concert is still quite remarkable. And it was the first time it was ever happening.
And it would have been life-changing. I mean, Adelaide was a quiet space.
Yep,
you
absolutely.
You had a fairly quiet family who just...
A loving family.
Yeah,
and my
loving.
mother never married again and never had another partner, devoted her life to her kids. And because I was almost like an only child, like a little bit spoiled, even though we were poor, we were very poor.
Spoiled with love.
But a lot of love, and like all the big occasions like birthdays and Christmas and Easter and all that, we were always together. Like the family would come back together. And then my sisters and brother started having kids. So I've got nieces and nephews only 10 years younger than me. So
incredible. And family is so important to you. And I know annually you get together with family and friends.
Cousins and those that are still alive, because they're
generally the way it goes.
They're all old as well. No aunties or uncles. Oh, the uncles went many years, but no aunties who I was fairly close to. So those aunties that I was very close to, their kids, my cousins, I've got a relationship with them, and now their kids who I have the relationship. No, that's my
different ones.
That's my nephew's
There's so many,
kids.
David.
But to this day, my nephew that lives here in Melbourne has got 4 kids, and I babysit those kids on a regular basis.
Very important.
Mum and Dad go away. I drive them to school, pick them up from school, take them to So I don't have my own children, but I have a great life there.
So let's talk about you in school.
Yep.
And you obviously weren't out. Did you have any understanding or idea at that point? It's a common question that we all get in our community. Oh, you must have known at school. Or was there anything that stood out for you at that time?
Well, apart from being highly attracted to
Pom-poms.
Pom-poms with the football club. No, but like people on television, men on television, or men in a magazine, and of course, I would have used them as my inspiration to do something. And
read, I hope, David.
Yeah, read.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll use
for
that
the
word.
articles.
For the articles. But I never said I didn't put the two together in my mind that I was gay. I was also an altar boy, Catholic school. But my friends, by the time I got to high school and were leaving school, they were coming out. But then we went back in the closet because it was hard.
Difficult.
It was really hard. And one was having a shock therapy to stop him from being gay.
That's awful.
Terrible things. And the other ones were going out with girls, and I was having girlfriends. But eventually they said they were gay, but I still said I wasn't gay.
Okay.
Even though I was to images of men.
Yeah, but it's a lot to get your head around at that time in that space, and certainly...
And I did it for a long, long time.
Okay. Well, you said earlier that music changed your life.
Yep.
You started work in a record shop.
I did. And it was back in the era where there weren't many record stores. There was a local shopping centre, Arndale Shopping Centre, for those who see this in Adelaide. It was part of a book and card shop and record store. And eventually the record store moved to just a bigger record store, and it was a very successful one. And I worked there for over 10 years. And then because I knew all the record company people, they became my friends, and I would throw parties and they would all come to those parties. I got a job at a record company. They offered me a job, and I went, whoa, this would be cool.
This is good.
And
rare.
And rare, yes. Yeah. And I was a sales rep for a record company. always having in mind that I wanted the role, and I would even say to the guy who was a good friend of mine, I wanted his job, which was the promotions, PR role and marketing role. And I'd always say to him, I want
Watch
your
out.
job. I want your. He said, well, I'm not going anywhere. And we'd joke about it. And then, and that was RCA Records, one of the big international record companies. And eventually a role came up at EMI in that role.
Incredible.
And and I got it. I got the job. And then within about 8 or 9 months, the state manager got it transferred to Melbourne. A lot of the big, like Myer, Brash's and
CC
Sanity,
Records and all those,
CC Records,
yeah.
like so many, and all the Coles Kmart was all here centred in. So his role then was to looking after them as a national sales role. And he got here, he was the manager of the state, and he wasn't happy with one of the guys that was doing what I was doing in Adelaide. So he rang me up one day and said, do you want to come to Melbourne? And my biggest dream was to move to Melbourne. My job was to look after Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Which I grew up with.
Countdown.
Which I grew up with, thanks very much.
Countdown and all the major radio stations. And it was when radio was going FM, so it was the beginning
Big
of
changes at that time.
Triple M and Foxes and all that, yeah.
And that independent ability to tune into whatever radio station and all these bands were coming out. What age were you approximately at this time?
I was fairly old, because I remember I worked 10 years in retail and then about 4 or 5 years in Adelaide for record companies. So I was in my early 30s when I came here. Still not out.
No, still not out. Still any advancements on the magazine?
Yeah.
To real life?
No. No.
So you were still in the process of running that through.
And the interesting thing is that the record company people back in those days were very straight. So therefore, it wasn't an easy time to come out. It was very much a blokey sort of situation, apart from the Mollies of the world and whatever, who I became good friends with. But you just...
So that leadership was quite the stereotype. What we would perceive it as a stereotype picture. But the performance, surely, and the Mollies and the characters at that time would be a bit more liberal.
Again, weren't really out in you couldn't be. You just couldn't be.
Well, performers got married, didn't they? And then you found out 10 years later it was done for the reason of publicity.
Because so many people would come to Melbourne for Hey Hey It's Saturday and Countdown. So the record companies would be flying them in from around the world, and you're babysitting all these big international artists and the local artists that were on your label as well. Like one local band, a little band called Crowded House.
A little band of the time?
Yeah, well, they were Melbourne-based. They were signed to an American company and had American management, but they were based in Melbourne. And so therefore their management would ring me, and that was before mobile phones, so it was on a landline, and there was no emails or anything.
No internet.
So just calling me saying, hey, can you ask the boys to do this? Or the American company would be, because I was there, even though head office was in Sydney for EMI. And so therefore I had this amazing relationship with the band. And taking him to Hey Hey, like Liam, Neil's son. I used to take him to Countdown holding his hand, a 6-year-old kid who now is recording artist in his own right. And when they came to launching their album in Melbourne, we were sitting around, trying to work out how to do it. And they went, well, Crowded House, it's got to be in a crowded house. David, you throw a lot of parties. Why don't we throw our album launch in your lounge room?
Let's do that.
Crowded House launched their album in my lounge room.
And you did launch. You were responsible for launching a variety of bands, and then there were music clips. I know that one of my favourites of Belinda Carlisle you were involved in. So you did a lot of work that people would have seen or heard of, but actually don't know your relationship with him.
Yeah, like the Belinda Carlisle, she came out for a couple of promo tours, and then when she was doing a national tour, she wanted to be in Melbourne, to rehearse in Melbourne so she could be close to me, the friendship I had with her, and then the tour started from Melbourne, and you'd go shopping with her, and she'd, you'd be in the change room with her with a pair of jeans down around her ankles, and David, come in and tell me what this dress is like. And it was one that she used in one of the videos.
You travelled around with stars including Grace Jones, names. I mean, it's incredible to think of the people that you've worked with.
Yeah, well, what happened was that eventually I moved over to Virgin Records, which was distributed by EMI, but it was still when Richard Branson owned it, and it was a beautiful relationship that everyone had with the record company worldwide. And then eventually I got poached to move to Sydney with BMG, which was RCA and it was BMG. Right. And I was actually taken up there to make the company bigger and to have a better relationship with all the media and whatever. And I would be out at the airport to pick them up at international flights, then like in limos driving around everywhere, going to interviews, flying to Melbourne to do Hey Hey or whatever. And so I would be on the road with a lot of bands.
A lot of legwork with all of the communication systems that we have now. Oh. I mean, just a regular phone, putting your 10 cents in. I don't even know what it would have been then.
It was, well, you never used a public phone, but to me it was an obvious thing. I was always really nice to the receptionist at the radio stations. So therefore I would, give them a vinyl, was still in vinyl days, or I'd give them tickets to the show, always introduce them to the artist when I'd arrive, where they used to tell me that most of the other record company people wouldn't do that. They'd just walk in and say, oh, we're here, like to do an interview, and then, just be led in to do the interview, where I always spent time with them, take a photo with the artist with them if they wanted it. So therefore, when I'd get to the radio stations, they would say, oh, David, your office has rung, this interview's changed, that one's... And I know the girl at that other radio station, so I rang her and I've rearranged it all for you, and I go, Thank you. So, it's just treating people the way you should treat people. But I was doing it to my own benefit as well. Yeah,
but you have continued that respect for people right throughout your life.
Yeah, I have. But it was the way I was brought up. I was brought up poor. We were very, very poor, but with respect for everyone. My mother, you could have, 10 people for dinner. Just as long as they let their parents know they were staying at our place for dinner. And she would just do it like that, without a really good mum. And there was this guy that would stay every weekend because he moved away from where we all were. He would stay at my place every weekend for 4 years. 4 years, every weekend he would be at my... And my mother would stick up for him more than me.
Yeah, they do that.
Yeah. So I was bought... I didn't realise it at the time. But it was just, and the confidence to be yourself as well, even though I was
going to say, are we out yet? So we're living in Sydney, we're travelling the world, we're doing all of the backstage, all of the grind behind the machine. Are we out?
I didn't come out until I left the record company and opened a cafe in Sydney.
Which is really extraordinary considering you were in that environment and you've moved to something a bit more, say, stable. Per se?
Well, no, I wouldn't call it stable.
Well, a cafe compared to flying around the world is a bit more concrete.
And just some of the artists I looked after, we mentioned Belinda Carlisle, Brian Ferry, I had a great relationship with him, Jim Kerr and Simple Minds, it was great. There were Pseudo Echo, Australian Pseudo Echo, we still interview Brian from Pseudo Echo, a great relationship I have with him. There's so many bands that I've looked after, and as you mentioned before, Grace Jones, crazy stuff with Grace Jones.
Great story.
And when I moved from record companies, I wanted to do something interesting, so I opened this cafe, and it was in King's Cross in Sydney, and all the record companies, because so many of the bands and all that stayed in King's Cross, would say, go to that cafe, you'll get great food, Dave was from the music industry, so like he won't be starstruck or whatever. And lots of the media all knew me, so they'd do their interviews at the cafe. So I stayed very much in contact with, and there was a bar around the corner that when I was working for record companies, we would take everyone there, and so therefore I knew them. So I knew people in the area as well. I sold it after about 4 years. Too much fun. Exhausting. And had worked my butt off, but boy, did we have a lot of fun.
Okay, so
and got sucked back into the record company business.
You went back in, and you actually made a move to Melbourne.
Well, I moved back, and then I moved back to Sydney again with because I was on contract work now, and so then after I'd been in Sydney the second time, I moved back. So about 12 years ago, I moved back.
You came to Joy 94.9. Hey, I'm trying to work out what year that would have been.
Well, it was
2000,
about
something or other.
12 or 13 years ago it was that I started at Joy.
Why? Why Joy?
Well, I came back and I was had a little PR company that I was doing tours for people. And I was in an office by myself, and I would listen to Joy all day long, and it became my companion. And in the car, I'd listen to it. And they were advertising for a sponsorship role, which is like a sales rep role. And I just thought I have to be part of this radio station. So I went along for an interview, and I was told that I was too qualified. And also they couldn't afford to pay me what I should be getting paid because it's community radio. Yeah. I said, the money's not, I need money to live off of, but money is not my main objective here. I want to be part of something like Joy, how important it is. So I developed the role that I didn't just do sponsorship, I did the marketing for the station, I did a lot of the events. I did all the events for the station, so which was a lot of fundraising as well. So, and then 10 years ago, it was a birthday, one of my birthday parties.
A big birthday.
And Joy were looking for new teams to be on air for Breakfast and Drive, and they were doing a different one each day. And you were at the party, and I said, you should do one, And
we were mid-dance, by the way,
we
probably
were
Belinda Carlisle.
1 o'clock in the morning, the mirror balls were spinning. And I said, you've got to do one, And you went, people have approached me, and there's no one I want to do it. I said, there must be somebody that you can do it with. Well, there is, you said, and then you turned
I slurred a little, spat quite a bit, and I said, it's you. I want to do a show with you.
The mirror ball stopped, the music stopped, and I went, what?
What? She's been drinking.
I had no desire or inclination to be on air. And even though I was doing the odd little spots, more on the arts, and because I have a real passion for the arts. And I said, well, let's talk about it during the week. And we danced off We
sobered up, we danced off, and we reconnected. And you were like, are you serious?
And then
yeah,
10
absolutely.
years we've been doing Friday Drive together.
Which is an incredible achievement, 10 years on air. But our friendship has really grown. I mean, we've known each other through some highs and lows throughout that 10 years. Yeah. And Joy's taken you and me on an incredible journey, and we've met some amazing people over that time.
Yep. And built up friendships with artists over the years that every time they come into Melbourne, or if they've got a show on, they always want to do us. And a lot of the publicists want to do interviews with us because they trust us that we'll do a good interview. Yeah. And then 5.5 years ago, I'd already left working at Joy at that stage, and after 8 years, and 5.5 years ago, I thought, Joy really needs a full-on arts program. So I started the arts program, which is a 2-hour show on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday Arts Magazine. And I'm just blown away with the amount of quality artists that we have in this. Visual artists, performing artists, contemporary dance, you name it. We cover it on opera, ballet, we cover it on Sunday Arts. And again, it's got a real reputation, and I feel as if I'm really contributing to the arts, and it's very much our community that we have on the show, because that's who a lot of the artists are these days from our community.
So you do have a real passion for the arts, and you have introduced arts to many people who perhaps that may have not been accessible. And you're now doing Bent TV, as we've seen.
Oh yes, yeah, Bent TV. I've been probably here for about 3 or 4 years. I'm hopeless at remembering dates and stuff, but yeah.
I think you do really well. But you have contributed so much to our community, David. On behalf of everybody, I would like to thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you, Susan.
And continue to do.
Yep.
You are an amazing advocate for our community. But where to next? Because you've just had a big birthday.
Hey, just keep on keeping on. My big thing in life is, and I mentioned it to somebody yesterday, that I haven't really planned my life. My life has just unfolded in front of me, and I've loved every twist and turn that it takes, and it's always been more positive than negative. Yeah. And I'm very lucky.
Well, you're very talented, and thank you for sharing this show, and thank you for sharing your life with me.
Okay.
I'll let you sign off. Just this once.
So that's been me. Thanks, Sue Wilkinson, for interviewing me today, and we'll see you real soon.